I want to invite now Mr. Ruzgar Barislk. Ruzgar is a senior investment officer in the International Finance Corporation, the IFC, responsible for Middle East and Northern Africa. Prior to joining the IFC, he was a partner at the GTI Group, and his investments have covered early stage to publicity traded industrial technology and media companies. Mr. Barislk, please.
Thank you, Avi. Just click the button.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I don't know if you can hear me, by the way, but Avi, Ayla, thank you for having me. I get a little bit of anxiety when I get asked to speak in Israel, especially on this topic, because both CleanTech and venture were reinvented here, and I know the Israeli audience really never holds their punches when it comes to Q&A sessions. But I figured we'd keep this presentation fairly brief. I have to give you a few words from my sponsors, and we can talk a little bit about what's going on globally in the CleanTech space with a bit of an investor perspective, and then we'll do Q&A. If there are members of the press in the audience, I'd request that my comments be off record. It just makes it more fun, and I'm happy to speak to you afterwards if you want to quote. So I will rely on my slides a little bit, and I will have to do this speech in English. So just a few quick words on my organization and what we do. The IFC is the investment arm of the World Bank. The World Bank is a large multilateral organization started right after the Second World War with a pretty lofty mandate, which is alleviating poverty worldwide. The way my colleagues like to put it, we work to put ourselves out of business. It's not going to happen anytime soon. There are still plenty of poor people in the world. The World Bank works across different functions and at various levels, but the IFC focuses on the private sector, on companies, and on enabling, helping, financing companies who are going towards emerging markets. I'll come back to that in a minute. Israel is not an emerging market, but there are some very compelling reasons why we come to Israel and look for companies here. Large organization, active all over the world, with a focus on developing countries, working as an investor, an advisor, and as a fund of funds, with a large portfolio of assets. One reason I'm mentioning this is just so you can take my comments with a grain of salt. I'm an investor in a large institution, which colors my thinking a little bit, and I'd love to hear your comments to what I have to say. IFC is, as I mentioned, global. We do many projects. Many of them tend to be with very large companies. But we felt compelled to go into venture capital as an asset class. And when we did that, we picked CleanTech as really the first sector to go after. And that has a number of reasons. Large organizations don't like things that they can't put their arms around, that are small, that are intricate. And so venture is not something that really fits many large organizations. And they tend to dabble and go in and out of these sectors. So for us, it was fairly similar. We noticed that by chance, a lot of our returns in the last 10 years were driven by not the loans that we had given out, but the afterthought, options, warrants, small equity investments we had made in African telecom operators, which have just completely taken off in the 2000 to 2010 timeframe. And that gave the organization really the stomach to say, okay, let's go and see what we can do at the earlier stages where companies really need our support. And when we did that, as I mentioned, we picked CleanTech as the first sector to go after. And we did that because, for several reasons. The main one was that CleanTech sits at the intersection of things that are really at the heart of what we're trying to do with poverty. It sits at the nexus of energy security, of food security, of access to land and water, and CleanTech broadly defined touches all of those. So just a quick definitional thing, and people in the industry disagree on this, but the way we define early stage in venture is really the point where, maybe to give an example, Nir's business is coming to today. So we are an investor at the point where companies have developed the technology and are looking to deploy it. And so Israel is a very exciting place from that perspective as well. A few more, I guess, slides on what we do and how we do it. We started with CleanTech as one sector and are now gradually expanding into other sectors as well in the venture capital space, looking at high-impact sectors in healthcare and education. But CleanTech remains a core focus. And so maybe I'll give you a few thoughts on what I think is going on in the industry and maybe where the opportunities are. I was trying to think if I have an enduring message, and I think it's not this one. This is another slide on our portfolio, so I'll skip this one. It's probably this one. And I see a friend in the audience who is probably the preeminent, one of the preeminent venture investors here in Israel, and he's chuckling. But
Me too.
We can talk about this. There's obviously a personal value judgment here as well. But venture returns, and especially CleanTech returns, have been challenged as an asset class. And like it happens in many business cycles, there was a boom, a rush into CleanTech as a sector with a lot of money raised and investors who were coming at it for the first time. And the results, as they're measured here, haven't been very pretty. That was stage one. Stage two was really the reaction towards that, which is kind of money getting sucked out and people becoming a lot more anxious and reserved about making investments. And I think we're now slowly moving beyond that. But the message I'd like to give is, despite some of what you may hear in that, A, the story is gradually changing, and B, I think it is indeed a lot more exciting to be an entrepreneur. And it can be a lot more lucrative as well, especially if you're backward looking today. So some thoughts on sectors, trends, and maybe starting with a marketing point. When you're raising equity capital for your startup, which is where management teams spend a really good chunk of your time, marketing is a big part, and a marketing skill is a big part of that. One trend is that CleanTech is becoming a little bit of an iffy word. People are putting different spins around it. Resource efficiency, sustainability seem to be the ones that are du jour. I think that'll change over time, but for now, it's indicative of a couple of other points I want to make, which is speed to market and profitability. The other point is that there is a lot of money out there, but investors are shy. And you ask yourself when, other asset classes, other avenues of investment are returning small yields, wouldn't people take more risks and look at this as an exciting opportunity? The answer is a qualified yes, but as I mentioned, the challenge is in picking quality and finding the right opportunities. I guess a few points I wanted to make here, especially in this audience. Investors have really, I think, learned a lot over the last 10, 12 years where this has been a global business. And as part of that, it's become a more effective market as well. There are different types of investors that focus on startups in different stages. And I think one of the really best news for our business, for startups, for venture capitalists alike, and for CleanTech in general, is the emergence of incubators and accelerators. I know Israel is at the forefront of this. It's one way the venture capital business was built here, but this is also becoming true around the world. They're popping up in the US, they're popping up in Europe. More excitingly, incubators and accelerators are popping up in the remotest locations you can imagine. And that's good for entrepreneurs who are seeking help, really hands-on help, and small amounts of money and mentorship. But it's also good for the next stage of investors who are now seeing a better quality, higher quantity set that they can choose from, and it builds their comfort level as well. So I think this is something that this organization directly addresses, and I think there's huge importance to that. The second stage, and these depend on each other, seed and Series A investments. I think you're lucky to be in this ecosystem. Israel has a well-functioning ecosystem in this sense. I'm sure plenty of people will complain that there isn't enough financing available for every one of these stages, but putting things into perspective, there is a healthy and working ecosystem here. You need this to get your business to the next level. I see a few faces in the room who are in this line of business. If there aren't many more of them, the reason is my previous slide. There has been a little bit of a pullback, but I think we're recovering slowly. Series B and beyond, this is where kind of the more money is deployed and let's say the bigger players are. It's also where my firm is active. This is the entry point into the business, into venture and clean tech for many large organizations. And what we're seeing is that corporate VCs, corporations, are becoming a lot more active, which, when you think about clean tech, which is a sector that tends to, or until now, has supported projects that are a bit more asset intensive, that take a little bit more money and oftentimes take a little bit more time to get there, it is appropriate for these types of investors, corporate VCs, to take on that role. I also think it's the reason why an organization like mine should take active, should become active in this space. There is really, you can call it a market gap or a market disruption, why there isn't enough funding here, and I think we can help out. This last one is interesting. This has never really stopped. This is project finance. This is what clean tech companies oftentimes need when they're successful, when they've launched their products, and what their customers need. This is growing like gangbusters. If you are a company that's got a working product that needs to install it, there's more than enough money that's flowing into that. And that's, I think, drives the rest of it. If you're a solar panel manufacturer and people will give you money to build a solar panel farm, well, then other people will try to invent better solar panels. Some thoughts on trends. So as you're looking at business models, business plans, and developing them, what's going on in the last few years? And again, this is one person's view. Some of these points are interlinked. I mean, what we're seeing is, as financing becomes more challenged, both on the venture side, but also in terms of going for IPOs, which is the ultimate exit, one of the ultimate exits for these companies, attention becomes a lot more focused on how quickly you can get there, what you need to get there, how asset intensive your businesses are. And some of the resulting reactions are that today people are getting really averse to business models that have the additional risk of being dependent to a subsidy, which for a long time was the case for a good number of sectors in clean tech. So to the extent that your business is viable on its own without any outside external public sector, government, otherwise support, that's a plus. And if it is in there, then it is an additional risk factor that people have to get over. IPOs are getting delayed. And this is a differentiated comment. It really is depends on the geography you're in. I guess one exciting fact, and I say this a lot, but I think it's worth repeating. One other reason why it's exciting to be in Israel is Silicon Valley companies sometimes, often, focus and only dream about capturing the U.S. market. And Israeli companies, de facto, are never satisfied with just being a big company in Israel. They do want to go worldwide. They do want to grow. And that allows us, an organization like mine, to work with companies that you start. There's a huge gap in terms of exits. If you're a Chinese company, you're going public in 2-3 years. That's not that unusual. If you're a U.S. company, it takes a lot longer. In Israel, I'm not sure if you've had any clean tech IPOs yet. Keeping fingers crossed on that. So as the exit gets delayed, people are becoming a lot more conscious about how capital intensive you are and how quickly you can de-risk your business. And unfortunately, but there is a a trend towards looking at companies that have developed the technology and helping them deploy versus the other way around. And this is, again, where the accelerators, the incubators, and the people who are doing really the early stage stuff are becoming more and more important. The last one is interesting. It's the expectation that all businesses are going to be global. You can have niche markets. You can serve different parts of a population. But the expectation is almost always that you will become a global business sooner or later. So the US market might be, or the European market might be big enough for you to be a sustainable business, but people are always asking the question, okay, maybe you do that as step number one, but when are you going global and how are you going global? And it becomes a big consideration. It's just something that as investors have become more global, for right or wrong, they're also pushing their portfolio companies into that direction much more quickly. Let me see. Emerging markets is another theme. It's something that's coming up more and more in the CleanTech space, maybe linked to my prior comment. It's especially with CleanTech, where we're addressing issues that are really related to resources. Oftentimes, the biggest inefficiencies are in emerging markets, which means the biggest opportunity is there as well. And it's driven by the fact that either the infrastructure is inefficient or non-existent, and that's driving the need. And so there are opportunities to bring technologies there, as well as opportunities to bring new business models into the emerging markets. Israel is indeed a bright spot. As an organization, we've been fortunate. We just closed our first 2 investments in Israel, which isn't too surprising. We embarked on our venture capital strategy only 2 years ago, and it took us 2 years to do 2 deals, which we're counting our blessings, and we're excited to do more. But it is clearly a result of the fact that there is a really vibrant ecosystem here. There's no other place in the world where you can come to one city and meet 24 startups in the span of less than a week, where there will be good quality, you will speak the same language if you're speaking English, and there will be others who are alongside with you who can help you vet the business, who can help invest in the business, who can help invest in the business if it's successful. And there is an entrepreneurial drive and a legal system where you see eye to eye. So I do think you're really lucky to be a part of that. Maybe some last thoughts on sectors that are ascending or that are really hot and are getting a lot of attention from an investor perspective. I think maybe interesting to note there is a very strong overlap between this and what's going on in Israel. Historically, this is not new for Israel, but where I am personally seeing both, and they're somewhat linked, the most exciting opportunities as well as the most kind of dollars and cents available are a few sectors. I had to put 2 check marks on energy efficiency. It's a big term. It encompasses a lot, but as corporations are driven towards this, as energy prices are increasing, solutions that target this across pretty much all subsectors get a lot of attention. So that's one category. I'm not going to go through all of them. Smart grid and water and wastewater are ones where Israel has really interesting technologies and that are really ascending. And this one I think is really the coming wave as we look at kind of global food price fluctuations and truly global logistics chains in agriculture and food. There's a lot of attention on technologies in that sector. I'm excluding some others. Kind of IT fits and goes across all of these categories and enables them. Consumer-oriented ones, business models are another one. I don't know where Nir went. I would put his business kind of straddling a few of these, but that's an exciting area as well. I think that's all I have to say for today. Thank you for your time, and I hope we have some time for Q&A, either now or afterwards.
No, we have now.
Now, okay.
Yeah. So, anybody has a question to raise?
Thank you. Yes, please.
Just a said before that CleanTech is dead. So maybe you can elaborate on that, because there were so many sectors and energy efficiency and everything.
Okay.
What do you mean by that?
It was, let me qualify the statement. It was intended to get your attention. I was talking about the term CleanTech rather than the sector itself. So it's CleanTech startups have gone, and investors have gone through some difficult periods over the last 10 years as things have matured more slowly. There haven't been any exits. And so investors' focus has been on looking to change that and on funding companies who can change that. And entrepreneurs likewise have adjusted to that as well. And so if you want to use a different term, I'm suggesting resource efficiency might be one that means exactly the same thing.
Just a practical question, sorry. How is the organization approached? How should we approach the organization with the new startups or ideas? Just directly to yourself? Or?
Sure, yes. Happy to work as a conduit into the rest of the organization. Just get in touch. Startups aren't shy about doing that, and they shouldn't be, so I'm happy to channel you to the right person. I, as Avi mentioned, tend to cover this geography, but if your business has really strong prospects in China, I have a partner who works there, similar in India, South America. So we've kind of geographically focused more than sectorally, but I'd be happy to answer your questions. Please.
Just on the emerging markets, as you said that this is a new trend, I was wondering, as we've seen the first CleanTech bubble, say, driven by major subsidies coming from the States, basically, does it come from the same side for the emerging markets, or is there any real economic backgrounds to it?
That's a good question. So the first part, I don't think it's driven by subsidies in the emerging markets. There are pockets of subsidies here and there, but by and large, it's not. I think it's driven by end customer demand. So whether it's the individual users in emerging markets who are becoming more affluent, more tech savvy, and more desire more solutions, right, that these companies can cater to them, or it's the private sector in emerging markets who is looking to drive change, get energy efficiency into their operations. They are really the consumers of clean tech solutions, and that's driving startups there, and it's certainly driving funding dollars there. Thank you, please.
Your investment criteria, are they purely financial or is it
A good question. They're both. So we are looking to drive commercial returns, which means it's not subsidized, it's not grant or aid. The other reason for it being commercial is if we or anyone else funds companies on a non-commercial basis, then it actually hinders their potential later on. Once they have that stigma on them, it can stay. The other reason is we have to work with co-investors, and they're not going to do deals that don't make sense. So we are commercial investors, but certainly that's the two hurdles. The investments we make have to pass muster. They have to be value added. They have to really make an impact from a societal or environmental perspective in developing countries. Thank you. One more question?
Just to emphasize on the criteria of your investment, the slide said $3 to $15 million for after product development. Can you clarify exactly what you are expecting in terms of?
Yeah,
are you supposed to be already in the market, or where?
Look, I'm gonna dance around that answer. It depends, and we can push and pull on that. I'll give you the comfort zone is for the company to have its first revenues or be very measurably close to getting its first revenues. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I didn't get clobbered today. That's great. Thank you very much.